Welcome to the Season 3 finale of Nothing Happens for a Reason. I am sitting here today with a heart full of gratitude as we close out this chapter. This season has been such an amazing journey, and I am so deeply thankful to the incredible humans who joined me to share their stories. They showed up with such raw honesty, helping us dismantle the platitudes and find connections, reminding us that we are not as alone as we may feel. Whether you've listened to every single episode this year, or you're just finding us as we wrap up, thank you for being a part of this community. We're ending this season with a conversation that feels like a perfect landing spot. Let's dive into our final episode of Season 3. This is Nothing Happens for a Reason. Hi, Ashley.
Hi, Claire. Thank you for having me.
Do you want to introduce yourself?
I do. So I'm Ashley. I am the founder of kinclosure.com and a griever.
Thanks for being here. I really appreciate it. I want to get into your company, Kinclosure, and all of that, but do you want to share a little bit first about your grief experience and who have you lost in your life?
Yeah, I'd love to. And I love the opportunity to be able to talk about them. I think for so many grievers, we don't get the chance to continue speaking about our loved ones that we've lost, especially as the years go by. People stop asking, you're sort of expected to be better. I'm an only child, and I lost both of my parents within 8 months of each other a couple of years ago. So in December of 2021, my father died of a heart attack right in front of me. So I saw him die, which was incredibly traumatic. And then 8 months later, I lost my mother to addiction. And so the grief has been very complicated, not having siblings or family or additional support to take on the tasks after parents die, wills and trusts and selling of estates and taxes and working a full-time job and trying to properly grieve, which I don't think I did very well. And I don't think that I gave myself enough of an opportunity to do that, especially in such a short amount of window. After my dad passed away very traumatically, I immediately had to turn to taking care of my mother, and still feel like this many years later, 5 years later, I haven't really given myself the chance to even grieve his loss. And I have found that it's incredibly complicated to grieve them both at the same time. I actually can't. I cannot hold them both at the same time. I'm either missing one or the other, and never can my body or brain or spirit do both. I think it's just too big. So it's been a bit of a complicated process. And Claire, I'm sure you understand that, having lost two people in such a short amount of time as well.
Yeah, and that what you're talking about is that term cumulative grief, right? Like losses shortly after one another and back to back. And you've used the word complicated a few times already, and it is complicated. And like you're saying, there's the physical process, there's the emotional process, there's all of the logistics, and it makes sense that you're like, I don't know if I can hold them at the same time, and I don't know if I've done some of the grieving process even at this point because it's just been too much.
It is. And, 5 years later, I think I even set myself these expectations of, well, surely this would be easier by now. It is not.
Yeah.
I think I've learned to hold it in a way that's acceptable to those around me, but I still wake up every single morning missing them. I still go to bed every single night thinking about them. I just got a new job, and the idea that I couldn't call and celebrate with my
Mm.
parents was every happy moment is countered with this bittersweet mourning, truthfully, of not being able
Yeah.
to share it with the only people in the world who loved me unconditionally. And that's so hard,
Yeah.
and to know that I'm going to anticipate lots of those throughout my life. And I think it's something I had no idea was going to happen in that way. But I have recently found some really incredible tools and new ways to tap into my grief and connect to my parents that have been just transformative that I'm also excited to talk about.
I think this idea of like, oh, a certain amount of time has gone by and it's supposed to look a certain way, and you're kind of alluding to maybe the pressure from society or community around us of what it is supposed to be. And I know for me, like that leads to so much loneliness or feeling stigma of having deep, deep grief still many years
Yeah.
later. And I think what you just said too around, the secondary losses of different phases of your life. I think sometimes people, especially who haven't experienced significant loss, think that grief is just like the sad moments. And for
Mm,
years, I've been talking to my therapist about how, like, I know that for the rest of my life, the really happy, positive moments are going to be the most devastating for me. Like, when I bought my first house, my sister was still alive, my mom was not, and my mom was like an interior designer, architecture, space her whole life, and I was like, she would have loved this, and I was just, like, devastated that, and I still am every day, that, like, she's never seen my house, she's never been able to make little sketches of my house, which I know she would have
yeah.
done, and
Oh,
so there's so much pain in, like, holding space for 2 things at one time.
I understand that so fully. I was so grateful that the thing that my parents did leave me at the end of the day was a little bit of money, and not a lot, but enough to put a down payment on a home that I
Yeah.
otherwise wouldn't have been able to afford. And so I have this really complicated relationship with my home, and
Yeah.
like I want them to visit so badly. I want them to
Mhm.
sit in my backyard and watch my chickens. They would think it's hysterical. I want them to sit on my couch and watch the Dodger game, but the reality is I wouldn't have this home if they were alive.
Mhm.
And so the feelings of being in this house, they're just so many ups and downs. I keep saying complicated. I don't know how else to
Yeah.
explain these emotions. Wanting someone to visit who can't, and otherwise I wouldn't be here if they were still here. So
Mhm.
it's a gift, but it's one that I would exchange in a heartbeat to have them back, of
Yeah.
course.
Yep, absolutely. I think you're right. There's really not a better word than complicated. Like, there's just not. So I'm
Yeah.
imagining we'll both use it a lot
I
in this
know.
episode because it's true. Like, that's what it is for so many of us, and it's incredibly painful though to have all of that.
But to have the 2 people on earth that just loved me unconditionally vanish suddenly, like, I've had to really reevaluate, I mean, my value system, where I go when I wanna share something positive, how to give it to myself.
Mm.
I was so lucky to have parents who just absolutely adored me, and I am grateful for that. And I think being
Mhm.
an only child, I got a lot of sort of attention and love, and enough to last me a lifetime, and I am so, so grateful for that. But it has led me to look for that sort of unconditional love in other ways, and I'm learning no one else can give that to me.
Mm.
I can give that to me the best I can, and I'm learning, but it has changed me entirely for the
Yeah.
rest of my life. Yeah.
Yeah. Were your parents still together when your dad died?
They were, yeah, 35 plus years, they were
Mhm.
still together, and I'm really grateful for them.
And from your perspective with your mom, I know you shared that she died from addiction.
Mhm.
Was that something she struggled with prior to your dad dying, and what kind of happened in the wake of that?
She did. She struggled with she was an alcoholic and struggled with addiction for the better part of a decade, severely. An alcoholic addiction unlike I've ever encountered in anyone else before. Not
Mm,
that I've had a ton of experience, but I remember going to Al-Anon meetings religiously and people pulling me aside and saying, "Maybe you should try Nar-Anon." So yeah, better part of a decade. She, was in and out of rehabs probably 20 plus times over that time and just could not really find her footing for a long time. My father, very codependent relationship, but my father really kept her on the straight and narrow. It was his full-time job. He took her to AA every day. He made sure she didn't have access to keys to go buy alcohol, made sure that he kind of like kept the money under control. So while that helped her maintain sobriety, it wasn't probably the healthiest way to manage that. I mean, because the second he was gone, no one was controlling or managing her disease anymore. And
Hmm.
it backfired in the biggest possible way I could have ever imagined. And someone dying from alcohol is, from my experience, I think one of the ugliest and saddest ways somebody can die.
Hmm.
It's slow, it's ugly, people don't understand it. I was living in Colorado at the time, she was still living in California, and she was so destructive that, I had to really learn very strong boundaries or else I was gonna go down with her. And for those of us who've had family members who struggle with addiction, you know that we cannot change them. No
Yeah.
matter what we do, it's not up to us. We can love them, we can pray for them. I could not fix her, and I had to pull back a lot. And that meant not going home, not taking care of her, leaving her in her house by herself. And a lot of times that meant neighbors calling me, screaming at me, saying, "Someone needs to come take care of your mother." It meant social workers calling me constantly, saying, "She's in the hospital again." It meant doctors calling me nonstop saying, "She has a brain bleed. We don't know if we can stop at this time." It meant, counselors calling me saying, "She's back in rehab. She needs clothes. Can you send them?"
Mm.
And constantly having to negotiate my boundaries. What am I going to do this time? I've done it 100 times before. Am I
Yeah.
going to fly home again? Am I going to pay the bills? Am I going to pick up her messes for her again? And it got to a point where I physically couldn't do it. And there were times where I thought, this is going to kill me before it kills her.
Hmm.
And she was grieving. I was grieving. She was in the throes of a very serious disease. And, it wasn't until finally I got a call one day from police letting me know that my mother had been taken to the hospital once again. She was unconscious and asked me what room the suicide was in. Like they thought my mother had tried suicide because there was so much blood in different rooms
Oh, wow.
from her drinking so much and falling
Mm.
and essentially just bleeding and bleeding. And so it was a really confusing time. I remember flying home very quickly thinking this was the time.
Yeah.
In situations with addicts like this, like there's so many close calls. Like she
Hmm.
almost died 100 times in my life. And you never know when is the time, And so I remember going home and going into my childhood home and seeing how absolutely destroyed it had been from her addiction. I mean, it was inhabitable. It was deemed like a site that can't even be entered. I had to hire hazmat crews to come decontaminate and clean the home, which essentially meant just gutting the entire thing.
Wow.
Um, it was awful. I mean, there was blood, there was biohazard, there was
Hmm.
things that you just can't imagine that someone who drinks could do.
Yeah.
And it was shocking.
Hmm.
And people who saw it thought that there had been a multiple suicide attempts in that home just because of how much they had seen. And so I just don't think anything prepares you for something quite like that.
Yeah.
Um, Eventually, my mother survived that last round and I ended up having to put her in a board and care home. So essentially somebody's home
Hmm.
and every room is dedicated to somebody who gets 24/7 hour care, spending $6,000 a month to make sure someone could keep an eye on her because I could not.
Yeah.
Not only could I not, I wouldn't. For my own sanity, there were moments where I thought maybe I should move home and I'll just take care of her. I'll hire caregivers, and I just couldn't do it. And so it was a really hard decision to hand over my mother's last days to strangers, but it was the best thing that I could do. And she lasted less than a month there. In the very end, she was nonverbal. She was going through liver failure. I believe she may have had a stroke towards the end. And I remember fighting to get her on hospice and doctors coming out and saying, well, she can still swallow. and having to pull out her will and trust and her final wishes and saying, if I cannot eat, drink, or have a meaningful conversation with my family, I do not want to be placed on artificial life support because they had her on a feeding tube at the time. And just showing that to them and saying, but this is what she doesn't want this. And having to fight and fight. And I remember going through Kaiser and they declined her hospice request, even though I believe she was actively dying. And one of the lessons I learned, and this is one of the things I've shared on Kin Closure, is I assumed I had to go through Kaiser for hospice. That's who her medical care was through.
Right. Yep.
So I didn't reach out to any other hospice companies. I didn't get her reevaluated for several days until finally I realized and learned from a social worker, like, no, you can call another hospice. And I did. And they placed her on hospice that day and she lasted 48 hours
Wow.
and died. And I'm so glad I got that advice. I hate that I didn't know that. I hate that she suffered even an extra moment,
Yeah.
but I'm so glad I listened to my intuition and my gut, even in the face of professionals who said, no, she's not hospice ready. And for me to say, I know she's dying.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you for sharing all of that. What a painful 8 months. Exhausting, I'm sure, on like so many levels, just like holistically, mind, body, soul, right? Just like exhausting. Did you choose to go home at the end for the 48 hours?
I did. And, I remember the hospice worker saying this was during COVID. And so, the board and care home had several people living there who were obviously immunocompromised and ill and older, and they really didn't want a lot of visitors as much as possible. And so my time with my mother in that board and care home in her room was very limited. And it prevented me from sort of being by her bedside constantly, which I think is what I would have done to
Mm,
my own detriment, right? I think we all want to be there in the last moments, and the last moments could be today, it could be a week from today, it could be a month from today, and I couldn't do that. And I spent that time at my mother's home starting to pack and prepare a lifetime of things between her and my father because it was $6,000 a month. And even though she was on hospice and I knew she was dying, I was hearing from medical professionals that like this could go on for months. We just don't know. And I didn't have $6,000 a month to pay for this. And so I really wanted to hustle to sell the home so that we had
mhm.
money to pay for her care. And I will never forget this. It was such an interesting moment, but I was in my parents' closet and I was packing up her wedding dress when I got the phone call that she had died.
Mm,
And I wasn't there, but it was so interesting that that is the thing I was packing up when I got the phone call. And I remember rushing, down the street and around the corner to this board and care house thinking I was like gonna catch her in time or something. And she was gone and it was still so shockingly devastating. You
yeah.
just are not prepared even when you think you're prepared.
Yeah.
And being alone. I didn't have a dad or a husband or a sister or a brother to hold me through that.
Yeah.
And it was so hard. And I'm really grateful for my mom's friends. I called them and they came right away. And one of their friends sat with my mom, sat with my mother's dead body in her room until the mortuary was able to show up. I couldn't do that. And that was at least 2 hours.
Mm,
And she promised me she wouldn't be alone because I just couldn't do it. And I hated leaving her alone any longer. And her friend said, I will sit with her the whole time. It was
mm,
so loving, just in the wake of such your worst moments in life. Like you
yeah.
see such incredible humanity. And man, I will never forget just the kindness of someone sitting with her so I knew she wasn't alone.
Yeah.
What a friend.
Yeah. Yeah. I can tell like how much these memories are just like can feel like real life. It was real life,
Like
but
it was yesterday.
like it
Yeah.
was yesterday. Because even as you're sharing, I'm sitting with, my mom's last few days and all of the things that went into leading up to our last few days. And then from when she took her last breath. And
Yeah.
I think that what happens right after the last breath is what most people don't realize starts a whole other chasm of, okay, now what? And, you know, immediately, like, okay, I was back home in my childhood home. My mom wanted to die there, and it was my other sisters weren't able to be there. It was me and my dad, and immediately, like, okay, now we call the morgue. Like, that's what we do next. And just like two strange men at 11 o'clock at night come into our home. And then we had to start making phone calls and, being like moving into action mode. I just remember having this thought of like, people deserve to know. And like, I was so angry. I was like, why do I have to jump into doing the next thing? Now I have to call friends and family and relatives. And then, like, immediately, it was just like a whirlwind, which I can imagine, I can make an assumption, is a lot of where your passion has come from for kin closure, because it is just a fucking whirlwind. And I knew nothing. I knew nothing until I was in it. And I remember like one lesson that I learned, and I don't think anyone would have like known unless they're in it, is like copies of the death certificate. Like we needed so many
I
copies.
know. You're
And
like,
I'm
what do I
like
need? 4? Like 20.
20, like everything. And it's just so much. And then luckily, I don't even like using that word, but like since my mom died of cancer and like we knew she was dying, we had conversations, we had things in place. Like we knew end of life stuff. We knew she wanted to get cremated, right? Like we knew those things. And
Yep.
then with my sister who died of an overdose in her 30s, those were not conversations we had had a ton of.
Oh,
My other sister and I, like, we all had talked after my mom died because we experienced that. And talking about end of life and death was not like abnormal in our family at that point. Like we knew my sister wanted to get cremated, but her husband didn't even know that. And so when somebody dies like unexpectedly, very often things are just not in place and conversations have not been had. And so then we're scrambling again to like figure what we're supposed to do in the wake of just like deep grief and drama.
making some of the biggest decisions of our lives while completely impaired by grief, which is entirely debilitating, especially that early on.
Yeah. Again, I want to hear so much about kin closure because maybe in the last like 2 years, I was telling friends that I was like, I think on top of all these other things I want to do in the grieving community, like I really want to help people with planning for end of life and both the emotional pieces as a therapist, but also like the logistical pieces. And last year I got my end of life doula certificate, and that was really important for me to not even like something I plan on actively practicing, but just like I wanted to learn more,
As a resource to share with people, I love that.
resource to share with people. But like I had this realization about 2 years ago. I mean, I knew it because I've lived it, but nothing gets me as activated and like angry when both for myself and when I have friends now who have lost people, hearing about immediately having to go into action mode.
Yeah.
Like one of my coworkers lost a parent last year, and he's like flying home to like go through the family home and donating, selling things. And I'm like, I did all the same things with my mom, and I'm like angry about it. People shouldn't have to jump in to doing all of these things that then like postpone our grieving or like don't allow spaces for it. It's also why I loved reading. I don't know if you've heard of it, Ashley. Swedish act of death cleaning.
I haven't.
Basically, in Sweden, they promote talking about death very early on. And part of it is like, so the people dying are not leaving a burden behind for the people that are left to, so they can allow them to focus on grieving versus like cleaning out the house and figuring out all the things, like all the things we're about to talk even more about. And so there's just so much out there that I think that, again, mostly American culture, like we don't do a good job with. But really, I just like, I feel the heat in my body when somebody's like, oh, this person just died. And now I'm like dealing with all these logistics. And I'm just like, I'm so sorry. I understand it. And like, fuck that. Like, it's
Yep.
literally, I get so angry and sad for people.
Yeah. I get it. There was an interesting part of my grieving where I suddenly wanted to, similar to you, learn about the process. I think I was
Mhm.
so caught off guard by things that really shocked me that I wish I knew more about, right? So, like, going to the morgue to plan, my mother's memorial and having to sign paperwork acknowledging that, well, her ashes will probably be mixed in with some other people's ashes because there's always a little bit left in the crematorium. And just like that
Shocking.
makes sense, but also like, oh God, like, well, what does that process look like? And what are
Yeah.
my options? And do you want to watch? Do you not want to watch? And so I read this great book called Smoke Gets in Your Eyes
Never heard of
that
it.
is written by a mortuary professional. And it's a little funny and she's got great stories, but it also taps into how things are done and why they're done in that way. And then also culturally in different parts of the world, how they treat their dead. And it's actually quite beautiful. It's funny. It's a book I recommend to people, which is a little like avant-garde for a grief book, learning about how things are cremated and what happens to bodies. But I thought, gosh, if anyone could just feel a little more prepared, and it shouldn't be taboo to talk about.
Mhm. Yeah.
you know? And even to realize, like, I remember them asking me, "Well, what do you want your mother to be cremated in?" And I said, "What do you mean?" And they said, "Well, right now she's just in the clothes she came in." And I
Mhm.
remember thinking, "She was in a diaper. I can't let her be cremated in a diaper." And going home and not being able to find any clothes that were appropriate. And I remember going to a Dillard's that day and like shopping for my mother's outfit she would be cremated in, and then simultaneously shopping for a dress for myself for her funeral.
Yeah.
And walking around this Dillard's just like, this is surreal. I'm buying her
Yeah.
cremation outfit and I'm buying a funeral outfit for myself. And it was so surreal. It just was something I hadn't thought of or planned. And again, just no one kind of prepares you for it. I don't know if that would have helped me or not, truthfully, but I think,
Yeah.
anything I can provide through the website, and a lot of what I'm trying to lean into right now with Conclosure are like hacks, like different shortcuts and different things that can make things a little easier that we just don't know about. Right. So, like, if I had known that I didn't have to go through Kaiser for hospice care, I could have just called another one. That would have saved me so much time and grief. Or, did you know if someone has a terminal illness, they can use their life insurance policy while they're alive to pay for their care?
Mm.
Who knew, right?
Yeah,
And
I didn't know
and
that.
how
Yeah.
big what a huge help that can be for people who need that money now. I met a
Yeah.
wonderful coworker whose mother has terminal brain cancer, and they found that loophole with her life insurance policy, and they were able to use that money to pay for round the clock care for her that they otherwise wouldn't have had. And so I want to find more of those hacks. And this is a bit of like a call to action to everyone who may listen to this. It's like, what are the things that you did that worked that no one told you about that's not on the AARP website? Because, by the way, that's like the only website that would come up when I would Google how to handle things relating to my parents' deaths.
Mhm.
The more we can just share the things that have worked for us, I think. How do you ask for more time off, right? The average time off for most companies in America is 3 days.
Yeah.
How do you ask for more? I have a template. I have an email. Copy and paste my email I used. It's on the website. It worked. It got me a month.
Hmm.
Right. So what else can we, like, what resources can we share that just aren't standard?
Yeah.
Is a big goal of mine with closure of, I want people to be able to talk about the things that have worked for them that can make it a little easier on others.
That's amazing, and even just hearing about the how you could support people with getting more time off, right? 'Cause that's another,
The
like,
biggest thing.
blood boily thing for me
Yeah.
is the 3 days bereavement that
Oh,
companies are guaranteed to give, and it was interesting, I follow a lot of different grief platforms, and there was one, and because I'm very passionate also, it's just another soapbox I can get onto about grieving and capitalism, and again, like, the anger that it brings up within me, and a few months ago, there was an Instagram account, I wish I could remember which one it was right now, but they made a post that was like, "In America, usually the second call somebody makes after hearing somebody in their life died is to their boss." And
ugh,
I relate to that deeply, like,
I do too.
and
Wow.
got in the comments because that's what I do. Because I always like, I go there usually in my grief community to, like, feel less alone, and there were so many comments being like, "That's bullshit, that's crazy, no one would call their boss second,"
I did too.
and I was like, "That is absolutely." I was already on leave from my mom because she was in the dying process, but when my sister died, I called my family, and then I called my boss, or
Me too.
actually, I had my partner call my boss, but
Yeah.
I was like, "You need to call my boss to let her know I'm not coming into work tomorrow." And so, again, back to what you're creating here and the hacks for things like that, not sadly going to change our capitalistic society, and, like, I want people to know how not alone they are in if your boss is one of the first calls you make, and then, like, how do you with your help, Ashley, like, how do you get extra time off? Because 3 days is nothing. 3 days is not going to help
No.
anybody.
Well, and I remember, I've not had a child. I've never had to take out time off from work. I know I pay into FMLA, and so I thought, "Is that an option? Do I go that route?" And no, that's meant for people who are still alive, FYI, and
Correct.
another thing you
Yeah.
don't know unless you've used, and so I
Mhm.
assumed, like, well, I'll just tap into that at some point. Like, no, that wasn't an option for me. Can I get a medical diagnosis that says I'm going crazy? That's another
Right.
option, but, like, should we need that?
Yeah.
I am so grateful that I had incredible employers, but our policy at the time, and probably still is, was still 3 days, and it required
Mhm.
conversations, emails, negotiation. But I have learned a lot about how to be a great manager when someone goes through something tragic because of what I experienced, and I'm very, very grateful for the people who helped me. I mean, I'll tell you this one thing is I was in the middle of planning my dad's funeral, and my mother was in the throes of addiction. I mean, the second he died, she was just down the deepest hole. And so I didn't really have access to the funds to plan a appropriate funeral, one that I wanted to plan for my father. And he was a college football coach and college professor, and the school that he taught and coached at for 37 years took on everything. I mean,
Mhm.
they filled an entire college gymnasium with people to grieve my father, and his memorial was
Wow.
so special. And I'm really grateful for that because I didn't have the money for something of that size, and he was so beloved in his community. But there were still things that they didn't cover, like catering. Like, how am I going to feed hundreds of people? Do I need to? And I remember being on a call. My boss called me one day just to check on me. And he said, "What can I do to help?" And of course, people ask that all the time. And I had no idea what to say, right? You're just in the middle of everything. And I said, "I don't
Mhm.
know." And he goes, "Who's paying for the catering?" I said, I don't know. I hadn't even thought about catering." He goes, "I'm taking it on.
Mm.
I'll take care of that. Send me the invoice. I don't care what
Wow.
it is." And I have no idea how he paid for that, but I
Yeah.
I couldn't believe the offer, and that's
Mhm.
another thing I will never forget, and this is something we hear about a lot in grief communities, and what I'm sure share all the time with people is not to ask someone what they need, but to kinda
Mhm.
just do something to
Mhm.
take it off their plate, right? Whether it's just dropping off groceries at the doorstep without asking what they want. I remember there was a time in between my dad dying and right after my dad dying, people wanted to bring food, which is
Mhm.
honestly, like, so loving, and we gotta eat, but it's the last thing you think of. And
Mhm.
someone called me who was going to bring me food. They said, "We're going to El Pollo Loco. What do you want?" I go, I don't know. I don't care. It had been like 8 hours since my dad died.
Mm,
And they said, "Okay, well, do you like white meat or brown meat?" I go, I don't care. It
yeah.
doesn't matter. Okay, well, do you like chicken thighs or breast? It doesn't matter. Like, I can't even
Yeah.
make that simple of a decision right now. And it was so well intended, but it was
Yeah.
also like the most aggravating conversation I've ever had. So
So overwhelming.
overwhelming. So I just cannot say enough about like the best way to show up for someone in crisis. A is to show up like with something. Not
Yeah.
a what can I do to help or I'm here if you need me, but like just coming up with the thing. And
Mhm.
I remember every single thing
Yeah.
that was done. I remember
Yeah.
every single thing. And you know what I also remember is every single person who did nothing
Yeah.
just
Oh,
as much.
yeah. Yep. I
And
remember those ones.
I have to try to have empathy for some of those people too, because I every single one of them had never been through loss yet.
Mm,
And I look back on how I showed up for friends and people who went through loss, and I didn't show up in the way that I would have been proud of today. I remember
yeah.
reaching out to friends and apologizing and saying, "I
Mm,
wasn't there for you in the way that I wish I had been. I didn't know."
yeah. I actually just had very recently a good friend who it's interesting because I remember the people that, like, disappeared, like,
Oh
deeply,
yeah.
and
Yeah.
this was someone I was actually living with at the time, and she showed up in really beautiful ways, and she's never been somebody on my list of people who, like, let me down or
Yeah.
failed me, and end of last year, her mom died, and we had a phone call because she's not local anymore. She was just like, "I'm so sorry. I was not there for you the way that, like, now that I've been through it, that, like, I would have wanted to be." And we just, like, both cried, and I was like, "I think you showed up in such
Oh.
incredible ways." Like,
Oh.
because again, like, I have people that they said that to me, I'd be like, "I appreciate the awareness now." But I was just like,
Of all people, you weren't the one, but she still thought,
You
yeah.
weren't the one, like, you weren't one of the ones."
Yeah.
Shout out to my friend Haley, one of my most woo-woo friends. She, like, went to a crystal shop and, like, bought me all these crystals and, like, bought crystals for my mom as I was traveling back and forth to the East Coast, wrote my mom a little letter.
Oh,
She was there, and so it was just really amazing. And like you're saying, you've had these moments of, like, calling people, being like, "I'm so sorry." And again,
yeah.
I loved the conversation because I also was able to be like, "Do not, carry that guilt and that burden because, like, you were
Yeah.
there. Yeah, you didn't understand it at the time, and you understand it now that you've also lost your mother and, like, you were there." So it was just, like, a really special moment for us to have that together, and I introduced her to breath work. Breath work is something that has been so
I
healing in my
just
grief.
I just experienced the most transformative breath work. This is what I referenced at the very beginning of
I was
2
actually
weeks ago.
wondering.
Oh my god, like, where has this been? I It
Yeah.
has changed my life. I'm so glad you mentioned that. It has
Yeah,
changed my life.
it has been one of, yeah, outside of just my, like, individual grief therapist I've been seeing for a very long time now. Breath work has been something that's been so healing for me, and because of that, and speaking of just doing things for people, I messaged Haley last year and I was like, "I think this could be really great for you." I actually didn't know she'd never done it before, which was a whole other, like, funny side story of this. So I didn't, like, prepare her for it.
Yeah, I wasn't prepared either.
I, like, found her a place in the city that she lives in. I confirmed the, like, date works for her, but I just booked it for her. I, like, emailed the facilitator for her because I was like, these are things, like, especially now that she's out of the initial, like, 2 months where people were showing up, I'm like, "Here's a thing. It's it's been,
Yeah,
like, 5 months. I'm just booking it for you. It's not like a gift certificate that you have to figure out to, like,
show up.
scheduling is overwhelming," and she also, like, has kids, and I'm just like, "Just confirm the date and I got you," like, everything else, and there were people who did things like that for me, like, just doing the thing and I don't have to use my brain. And
Yeah.
she had such a transformative experience, and she texted me last night telling me she's been going monthly ever since. And so as you were saying at the beginning, like, I've learned new tools. I was,
Well,
like,
what is
very
it?
curious of what these are for you.
Yeah, I had a really similar experience about 2 weeks ago, my very first breath work class. I see a therapist, a psychiatrist, I have a village, and I also see a somatic practitioner probably once a quarter, which has been very transformative for me as well. And so decided to give breath work a try. And again, no one prepared me for what I was stepping into. It was just absolutely transformative, and I didn't expect myself to sort of be able to tap in the way I was hearing the people around me tapping in. There were a lot of sobs, yelling,
Mhm.
screaming, a lot of, like,
Mm.
pounding the floor. The practitioner who led it did say, like, "You might get these, like, hands that do this thing."
The
Yeah,
lobster claws.
the lobster claws, I was like, "That's crazy." In the first few I would say the first 45 minutes, I just was so focused on the breath, and I could kinda hear people around me, and I was like, "I can't what is going on?"
Mhm.
And then I would say the last half hour, I just something switched where I lost complete control of just, like, my consciousness, and I went into a place that was so, so clear. I mean, I sobbed like I'd never sobbed in my entire life, and, this may sound crazy to some people, but at the very beginning of this, I mentioned I've never been able to grieve both of my parents at the same time.
Yeah.
And that's not a choice I've made. It just they never appear to me at the same time. I think they're too big. I really think it would just wipe me out if I was grieving them both together. And so when grief hits, it's one or the other. I'm either missing my mom or my dad. And
Mm.
in this breath work, I had this very clear vision of them. It was so clear of both of them together. And I mean,
Hmm.
I could hold them at the same time, and they sent me a really clear message, and it wasn't verbal, it was just like a knowing. And they said, "We had to leave this earth so that you could take care of yourself and become the person you're supposed to be." Because I
Oh,
had spent my entire life taking care of them.
yeah.
And we were very enmeshed, very codependent. The boundaries I had to hold with my mother from an addiction standpoint were so painful.
Yeah.
And every day I was having to make a new decision of, do I go to work today or do I take the day off because my mom needs me? Right. Or can I go on this vacation or do I stay home because my mom's sick again? And my dad was a very unhealthy person as well. And so I just was constantly coming home and caring for them and not living my own life. And after they both died, I'd really been asking myself these questions of why? Like, why would the universe take my parents away when I don't even have a sibling? I don't have a partner. I am all alone. Like,
Yeah.
why both of them? Like, can I have one?
Right.
And I got the answer in that breathwork course. And they literally were sharing with me that they were so happy to leave this earth and step aside. They were honored to do it so
Hmm.
that I could step into my life. And I've never believed anything more clearly in my whole life. And
Wow.
I'm not a spiritual person. I'm not a religious person.
Yeah.
It was overwhelming. And it's been shocking, and I've been sitting with it for 2 weeks now, and I'm starting to just accept it
Hmm.
and believe it fully, and I do, and it was just such an incredible gift, and I really implore anyone, grieving or not, to try and experience breath work. I mean, a beautiful gift.
Wow. Thanks for sharing about that.
Now it probably sounds wild, and so I have a hard time
No,
even
well, not to
talking about it
me.
because I assume people will think, "Well, that's nuts," but I don't. I just know it's so fully in my body that that is
Yeah.
exactly what happened, and I couldn't make it up if I tried. And so the lightness I have felt over the
Hmm.
last 2 weeks, because we
Yeah.
often lose people and there is no why. We don't get the answer.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
they gave me an answer, and it felt so loving, like the ultimate gift. And they were so honored and happy to do it. And wow. Ugh, I'll never be the same.
That's it's just so powerful, and my living sister, she introduced me to breath work probably I think it was in COVID, it was after our mom had died, and I was just like, "Okay, we're gonna like
Breathing?
breathe for 90 minutes. Like
It's a long time.
I struggle with meditation, and I'm just
Yeah,
like, ugh.
same.
And then I had a wild first experience, and then I've continued to do it in different forums since then, since 2020. And I go to some group classes with a breathwork practitioner here in the Portland area, Natasha Stewart. She's incredible. And because it's been so life changing for me with my grief and so many other things. Actually, her and I are in conversation of how can we collaborate on doing like a local breath work for grievers. It's just having my experience and my sister's experience and my friend Haley's recent experience and your recent experience. I'm just like, there's clearly something here because for me, I can touch into my emotions in very like controlled ways. I know that I do it to a point where I can survive. I can be a great therapist, and I am very disconnected from my body. And breath work is one of the few ways that I've ever felt like I could merge my two worlds
Yeah.
together in a way that feels safe, but also like I don't need to be in control because I like my control, and it's hard for
Yeah.
me to let go of my control. And I think in getting to know you a little bit just today, Ashley, I think you can relate to this. In the grief world, we sometimes like categorize grievers into like intuitive grievers versus instrumental grievers. And like I have my moments of being a very intuitive person. I'm like an emotional person. I go to therapy. I cry every day for the last 8 years. Every time I'm in therapy, I cry on my own, like I cry at movies. And like I've been a very instrumental griever. Like when my sister died, I jumped into like having a farmer's market where I made fresh pasta because that's what her and I did together. And
Oh,
like that's how it helped me stay connected to her and like my podcast, obviously, and all the things I'm doing in the grieving world. Like I am an instrumental griever. And so again, like it's a lot of people who like want to make something of it. And I again imagine that that's been part of what kin closure has been for you.
how can you turn your tragic losses into some kind of meaning? And honestly, that it doesn't always have one, right? But if you
No.
are the kind of person like you or I who's called to action, like creating closure is a form of grieving for me.
Mhm.
And also because I became the professional griever in my friend group and family group, people were coming to me every time there was a funeral to plan. And listen, I love telling people what to do. Okay, as the daughter of an addict and a codependent, a recovering codependent, like I love nothing more than to tell you what to do. Here's how you plan a funeral. Here's exactly what, you know what, let me just do it for you.
Yeah.
Like that is my personality. And so creating
Yeah.
closure was a way for me to
Mm,
actually just direct people there
yeah.
instead of trying to take on and fix
Mm,
and do things correctly. But it's also my form of helping, but it's draining, and I actually don't have it in me to do that as a one-off for people anymore. And so now,
yeah.
I built this incredibly beautiful website that I'm so proud of that took me so long because I had a very specific vision and feeling for it
Yeah.
that suddenly felt like, okay, this is ready for the world last October. And now I can direct people there. And it's
Mhm.
a better resource for them. It's taking things off of my plate and my, desire to control and fix. And
Mhm.
so it has been just such a great gift for myself and for hopefully for others.
And with the little bit of time that we have left, I know we're touching on different aspects of kin closure, but share like what can people find on the website? I know that one of your kind of mantras on the website is like nobody teaches us this stuff. And so yeah, what could people go to your website and discover?
So closure kind of really started as like a feeling that I have. And I'm not sure if this will resonate with everybody, but maybe it will resonate with some of us. The name is closure, and it's about like finding closure within family. And the sub tagline is mom would be so proud. And in my head, it's like, mom would be so proud. Dad would be proud too, but he probably wouldn't tell you, kind of a
I
feeling.
was curious about the mom piece when you've lost both your parents, but that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Mom would be so proud. Dad would be proud. He probably wouldn't say anything, but he would like go fill up your car with gas. Like that's how my dad showed his love
Yeah.
and kind of communicated. So it's a bit of a nod to that. And
Yeah.
yeah, no one teaches us this stuff. And I mentioned, when I was Googling things like, Do I have to pay off my dad's credit cards after he dies?
Mm,
Questions. There was no AI at the time, by the way, and not that we could fully trust that today, but,
yeah.
it would send me to websites like AARP and it would use language that, I'm an intelligent person. I work in communications that did not resonate with me.
Yeah.
And I thought there has to be something directed towards a younger generation. We are starting to lose our parents.
Mhm.
And my goal was to create content, share lessons I learned in very simple language. So you'll see articles on there that explain what a will is versus a trust.
Mhm.
And I talk about them in comparison to a Google Drive. So we know what a Google Drive does. You can share and save a lot of your information there, and you tap into it and you can share it with other people. Like, I'm
Mhm.
trying to make references that make sense
Yeah.
because it's not always clear. An advanced directive, like how do you make that make sense? Okay, so it's like a checklist. And so just making things simple. What is it really? Like
Yeah.
use simple language, no legalese. I'm really made it a point to just keep it very clean and a twinge of humor where I
Mhm.
can and as appropriate. And it's really categorized in three categories, sort of like the before a parent dies. And this can be content for anyone grieving or having somebody that they've lost, but it is a
Mhm.
bit focused towards those losing their parents. The before, how to have a conversation with your parents if they don't have a will or a trust. Most don't. And too afraid to talk about it. And I talked to so many people who were like, I've tried. My mom and dad think they're fine. They don't think they need it. They've
Yeah.
written it down on a napkin.
Right.
And I
Right.
cannot tell you, but the advance directive that my mother and father had was so clear. It truly left me with no guessing.
Mm,
Right. And so when I was able to tell that hospice doctor, my
yeah.
mother says in her advance directive, which is in her will, that if she cannot eat, drink,
Mhm.
swallow on her own, and have a meaningful conversation, she does not want to be kept alive. No questions asked, right? And so I didn't have to negotiate with myself, when do we or when don't we keep mom going?
Yeah.
And that is a huge gift. So I have templates on how to have that conversation with your mom and dad. So that's kind of the before, there's different topics there. The during is those types of, conversations around if you have a parent who's actively dying, how to navigate hospice, how to advocate for them, how do advanced directives come into play? And the after, which is funeral planning, some grief resources, all of the things that, come after. And that's sort of the paperwork stuff, how to ask for more time off, different, resources and podcasts and books that have been helpful in my grieving process. So a lot of it has been firsthand experience. The new phase that I really want to start to lean into is hearing from other people about those hacks and things that they
Mhm.
found, loopholes, things that have made the process easier for them that we just don't know because they literally do not teach us this stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's so, so wonderful. I
Thank
think it's
you.
such an incredible thing that you're creating, and I think it's amazing timing too of us having this conversation too. And yeah, I love this like angle of as millennials, how do we have the conversations
Yeah.
with parents and maybe normalize this conversation more, which is something that even again doing the end of life doula training like is part of that for me.
Yeah.
And I'm also really passionate about our generation and other like we need these things too, which I'm sure is also something that you very much care
Yeah.
about. But like having a sister who died in her 30s who thank God we knew she wanted to be cremated, but other than that, like I could get hit by a car tomorrow. Like I don't want to put burden on anyone that I leave behind at whatever age. Like I want the people I leave behind to be able to have the best chance of like grieving,
Yeah.
not having to take care of like so many different things or trying to figure out what I would have wanted or right. Like if I'm incapacitated, like I want to be really clear what my needs and desires would be in that. And I don't want anyone having to make the decision because I also know not just strain and like trauma that can put on someone, but it also like divides families. And I'm like,
Yeah.
I like my control. We've already identified that. Like, I want to be the one that dictates what happens to me, and I don't want it to cause any problems from anybody else in my life.
Yes.
I think that your passion and what you're wanting to do more and more of, there like isn't enough of us, but I'm really grateful that you and I both are like, these are important conversations. Like
I
these need to
know.
be had. And again, I think what you're doing with kin closure is just beautiful and so amazing. And I like can't wait to see what else you do with it.
Thank you. And it's one of those resources where it's not something that people want to read or go to. My goal is that it's there when you need it,
Yeah.
right? I mean, I'm probably not getting the most page views and Instagram likes on my content because it's heavy. And I hope you don't need it for a while.
Yeah.
But I hope when you do, because you will, it's an additional resource there that can help make some things a little bit easier. And also really passionate about preparing these things as a single woman with no partner and no children is I have an advance directive. I have a will and a trust. And it's less of not making things complicated for who I've left behind because I have no one I've left behind, but it's peace of mind for myself that
Yeah.
doctors or whoever is with me at the moment will have the resources and be able to make the right decisions for me because it's
Hmm.
really heavy
Yeah.
knowing that there's no one there. Like, there is
Mm.
no one at my bedside if I'm in an accident, and not to say I don't have friends who wouldn't rush to me, but it's a heavy thing to think about, and I think there's a lot of us.
Wrote a question down and you've touched on a little bit of this and so maybe it's going to be the same answer,
Okay.
but what I wrote down was if you could go back to a version of yourself before you started kin closure, even maybe before the loss of both of your parents, what is one really practical thing that you wish somebody would have handed to you?
Oh, I love this question so much. I think about this a lot.
Yeah, I'm
And
sure.
there's a few things. This actually makes me very emotional. There's a few things in terms of like regrets I may have and
Mm,
things I wish I had done. First of all, I wish I'd asked my parents a lot more questions about their life.
yeah,
I mean, simple stuff.
yeah.
Like, "Mom, why didn't you have more kids?"
Mm,
"I don't know why I'm an only child. Like, how do I not know that?"
yeah,
Or, "Dad, tell me more about your childhood growing up on the farm. Like, I don't know the stories." And so that's one thing I wish I had because that's the only thing we can kinda take with us are these memories, and
yeah,
I just encourage people all the time to, like, just ask your parents questions and talk to them, and that's very important to me. The next is going through all of their things on my own after they died. I really wish I had taken more time. I
mm,
was in such a hurry
yeah,
to just get rid of it all and move on, and I lived in a very tiny home at the time, and I thought, "Where am I gonna put all these things? Like, I can't take all this with me." And I really wish I had just slowed down and maybe put things in storage and given myself time to go through them. I had one aunt, I will say this, my aunt Bianca came out one day to help me go through all of my parents' things. We were going to have a yard sale and get rid of a lot of stuff. And I came across, and many of us will experience this at some point, all of the artwork and homework that my parents saved from me as a child. So all these like little paintings and papers and art from growing up, and I thought, "Who's gonna want this now? No one wants
mm,
this." And it hurt my feelings to throw away my little things, and I remember I started
yeah,
just throwing it all away, and my aunt stopped me, and she goes, "Don't you wanna just look through some of this?" And I said, "No one wants this." And she pulled out this painting I did from, like, 1st grade, and she looked at me, and she goes, "I want this."
mm,
And she took it with her and kept it, and it was so loving because it was someone, just someone who cared, but
yeah,
really wish I slowed down. I can't tell you how often I think, "Oh, I wish I saved that thing. I got rid of that thing, didn't I?" And
mm,
I hate to put so much on stuff, but there's things I wish I had.
yeah,
And when someone's gone and it's just their belongings that are left, like, I wish I had kept one of my mom's flannel shirts. Can't tell you how often I wish I could put that on when I'm gardening in my backyard, right? Or
mm,
more of my dad's hats, these little things. So I just
yeah,
encourage people, and I wish I had this advice at the time or this knowing of just slowing down.
mm,
There's nothing to rush to. Grief is going to be there forever. And
yeah,
I think I just wanted to get the process going so quickly. And little did I know that 5+ years later, I'm still missing those things and I'm still
Yeah.
grieving, and that doesn't go anywhere. So there's no hurry. If anything, take your time. It's
Yeah.
not going anywhere.
It's not going anywhere. Yeah, what a beautiful final message for this episode. And I agree with the like asking questions, and I remember the first significant moment of me learning like what secondary loss was, being to my therapist about the memories that died with my mom that I'll never know now.
Yes.
And whether it's family history or things about her. And
Yeah.
those things hit me more than almost anything
All the
else
time.
within my grief of like, wow, I'll never know that part, or I
Yeah.
can't call her and ask her these questions. And so
Mhm.
I think, yeah, asking the questions, being present, and then, yeah, taking your time with logistical things like cleaning out the house and just the grieving process in general. Because, like you said, so many people want to rush through it, and there's nothing to rush through. Like
Yeah.
it will be there. It's going to be there. We carry with us forever. It changes and evolves, but it's there, and we don't need to try to run.
No. The other thing that is a piece of advice for anyone who has to go through this at some point, but I mentioned, I had a whole home full of things to get rid of. And hosting a garage sale was maybe the most painful thing I had ever done. And having to put a
Oh,
price tag on my parents' most precious things, like
yeah.
that shovel my dad used to dig all of his holes for his tomato garden, right? Like, how do you put a price on that? And so I remember setting up this garage sale and people asking, how much for this hose and how much for this ladder? And I'm like, how do you put a price on those things? And so ultimately, I gave everything away for free. And
Yeah.
I wish I had gone into that with that mentality of like, this is getting new life and a new home, and I can't take it all with me.
Yeah.
But putting a price tag on the simplest things was so painful. And so the art
Mm.
in the feeling of just donating or giving it away to the next place to have new life was actually like a really beautiful experience that started in a really ugly place.
Wow, I literally had never even thought about, like, a yard sale. Like, I know, like, estate sales, like, I am assuming somebody has died with those. Yeah,
Yeah,
we just, like, gave everything, like, huge carloads, multiple, to, like, Goodwill, which was hard too, like,
yeah.
but yeah, I can't even imagine, like, putting on a sticker and, like, people negotiating and haggling
Ugh,
these things, like, oh, I just, like, my stomach dropped as you were
skip
saying
it,
that, because 'cause I'm
skip it.
just like, yeah, skip it." Yep. Wow, well, thank you so much for sharing, again, those really beautiful last insights, and I just have really appreciated our talk today. I'm very, very excited to see what you do with Conclosure, and maybe future collaborations that we can have too. I think you're an incredible person. So thanks for reaching out, and thanks for being willing to do this. Shout out to our mutual friend Erin for
Shout
connecting
out,
us
Erin.
too.
No, I know. Clara, this is amazing. I rarely get the opportunity to talk about my parents, and it felt so loving to get to do that with you
Mm,
today, and so safe. And thank you for creating a space for those of us to share our stories because they're important. Mom would be proud,
yeah.
and sister would be proud.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Ashley. So that's it for season 3 of Nothing Happens for a Reason. Thank you for spending time with me. As I take a little break to prepare for what's next, please know that this community doesn't stop just because the episodes do. I am already looking ahead. If you have a story that refuses to be wrapped up in silver lining, or you're living the reality of a loss that people don't often talk about, I'd love to hear from you. I am now accepting submissions for guest considerations for future seasons. You can find the link to submit your story in the show notes or on my website. I would be honored to read it. And in the meantime, stay connected with us. Join the Echo Registry waitlist if you're ready for that tactile, pen and paper connection. And remember to grab the free ebook on my website. Follow along on Instagram and join the newsletter to see what we're up to behind the scenes. And finally, if this season helped you feel a little less alone, please leave a rating and review on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. It is the kindest way to support the show while we're on hiatus. Thank you for trusting me with your time, and take care of yourself. I will be back in the fall for season 4.